What do you think about the Bushes announcing that they didn't vote for Trump?
Okay, so here's the thing that I want to talk about with you, Steve, because I want to go next level for this audience. I got in enough jokes in the first few minutes, so let's do something serious here. I was talking to you about your comments about the Bushies. And about how you said that George W. was one of the most destructive.
Not one of them. Let's get it right. The most destructive.
The most destructive.
The most destructive.
And you said he could have been the most destructive for 3 times over. 1, for the financial crisis. 2, for the Iraq war. Those are pretty obvious to people listening. But then you said the biggest offense of all was his dereliction on China. And that's what I wanted you to talk about a little bit, and why you're so passionate about China. And you think it's actually his absenteeism there was even worse than what he did with the financial crisis and with Iraq.
Well, and by the way, the president's lifting off here shortly to go to China on a very important visit, probably the most important visit in this entire Asian trip, and one of the most important visits the president's had in many, many years. Listen, we've got this is President Xi. This is not Steve Bannon. His 3.5-hour speech a couple of weeks ago was the single most important political speech of the 21st century. I think you can actually argue the 21st century might have actually, in years from now, that people may say it started there, because he very fundamentally went through how the Chinese Confucius mercantilist authoritative model has beaten the West. And it's their world now. They're a hegemonic power. It's not that they're rising to be a hegemonic power. It's not what they always wanted to be. Is considered a great power, along with the United States and Russia. They're saying, hey, the game's over. And in a couple of years, and by the way, there are 5 things the Chinese are doing right now. One is what's called Plan 2025, which they will dominate. They laid this out a few years ago. They will dominate 10 separate industries, including robotics, including artificial intelligence, including chip manufacturing, all by the year 2025, and they're very far down the road of doing that. Number 2 is where they're One Belt, One Road. This One Belt, One Road is where they're taking the geopolitical strategies of a guy named Mackinder, a Scottish guy, and Mahan, who was this great theoretician in America that laid out what the British did in sea power. The Chinese are doing it. They're tying together the Central Asian countries with the old Silk Road, a superhighway.
The world island.
The world island. Who controls the world island controls Asia, or who controls Central Asia controls the world island.
Can you guys explain that concept? That's fascinating.
Okay, so Mackinder, there was a Scottish guy named Sir Alfred Mackinder that came up with a geopolitical theory that showed what Hitler and what Alexander the Great, everybody's been trying to, all these great conquerors, Napoleon, is that the pivot of the world is around Central Asia. Who controls Central Asia controls the Asian landmass. Whoever controls the Asian landmass controls what they call the world island. That world island is Asia and Europe as it connects. And whoever controls the world island controls the world. It's been something that geopolitical thinkers have been looking at for literally centuries. And the Chinese are doing it. This One Belt, One Road is audacious. It's got all the naval bases that the British and the Americans had, built upon the geopolitical theory of Mahan, that you have to control the choke points of Singapore, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, the Gibraltar, the South China Sea. If you control those choke points around the world island, which the British did, and that's where they rose to their empire, and the Americans then followed them. The Chinese are doing both at the same time. So that's number 2. Number 3 is on financial technology. In financial technology, they're really working out to become the world's reserve currency, and also have financial technology that the United States cannot decouple them from the world's capital markets, which is our one point of leverage over them. The last is the 5G. They're leading in the rollout of 5G, and we'll have 5G way before the United States will have 5G. So they will dominate in technology that way. It's pretty awe-inspiring what they're doing, and they're in your face in doing it. The Chinese are using all forms of state power to be at economic war with the United States. It's obvious. By the way, J.D. Vance wrote the great book Hillbilly Elegies. If anybody hasn't gotten it, you should read it. J.D. was a young Marine Corps officer, went back to his Ohio and wrote about his family. Comes from a very blue-collar family. And it's the sociological underpinnings of the Trump revolution. But in there, he told me about the study he had seen from Harvard and MIT that shows there's a direct correlation between the factories that left and the jobs that left for China, and the opioid addiction and the opioid crisis that we have. You know, Raheem will talk later. Raheem's gone out and, is doing this book going across America, but you can see the ascendant economy of Silicon Valley and Wall Street and Hollywood and Washington, D.C. all benefited from the rise economically of China. And the rest of the country was economically destroyed. Now, the Bushes and that whole group in the early 2000s told us time and time and time again, as they sold one thing after the other, that as China came in and they became, we gave them fair trade deals, and as we brought them into the World Trade Organization, we gave them most favored nation, MFN, most favored nation, that as they got wealthy, they would liberalize. As they got wealthy, they would become a liberal democracy. As they got wealthy, they would become a free market economy. Well, guess what? This wasn't kind of wrong. It was dead wrong. And so in the year 2017, in November, the president of China, after consolidating power and becoming up at the level of Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping, he tells the world that, hey, we won. And here's how we won. And here's how we're going to reshape the world in what they call the new era. We have an enemy of incalculable power, and they're not a strategic partner. They are an enemy. And we have to understand that. And what you're seeing in the Persian Gulf, this is what I keep saying, Qatar is everything. What do I mean by that? It's very simple. That China and Turkey and Iran have formed an alliance, and you can see it every day. And that alliance wants to control the Persian Gulf. They want to control the oil resources of the Persian Gulf. In one belt, one road, what that wants to do is really to connect not just the central heart of Asia, but connect political Islam with the Confucian mercantilist authoritarian East. Once that's combined, that is a combination that the United States has never seen. And you're going to have opposing that, you're going to have Europe, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, Australia, India, Japan, those countries around the side. But I got to tell you, folks, that's the dark valley. This is the 1930s, and that's the dark valley we're going to walk through for the next 20 years. The valley of decision. And who got us here? Here's who got us here, the elites. The elites got us here, right? These trade deals, this allowing China to run the tables on us, of forced technology transfers. It's the elites of Silicon Valley, of New York and Wall Street and the media, Washington, D.C., and Hollywood. And here's the thing. Here's the crisis. Xi gives this speech, 3.5-hour speech, the most important speech of the 21st century. Gave a speech that Hitler or Mussolini or any of the Soviet guys or the military junta that ran Japan would never even think of giving. And did the media really cover it? No, you had a story in the New York Times, you had a story in the Financial Times of London, you had a story in the Washington Post, you had a couple stories, but there was no narrative. There was nobody saying, hey, is anybody paying attention to this guy? You see what he just said? The TV coverage, here's what the TV coverage was. In the speech, that in hindsight, in 20 years from now, they're going to look back like Hitler gave a speech at the Nuremberg rallies. Here's the TV coverage you had on CNN and BBC. It was the 91-year-old former premier was sitting there. It was 3.5 hours. He kept checking his watch. He's 91 years old, right? And he had a big magnifying glass. They thought it was a goof. They played the TV thing for a goof. They didn't have and by the way, here's what gets me so upset. It's the people. Brexit and 2016 are inextricably linked, okay? If you listen to Breitbart News Radio, you know that because Alex, Marla, and Raheem were broadcasting live from London for weeks to lead up to that. The Breitbart audience knew it. The Breitbart audience knows who Nigel Farage is. On the night of Brexit, when CNN came on, they couldn't even pronounce Brexit. Don Lemon and these guys, on the night of the Brexit win, they couldn't even find somebody who could pronounce the word, much less understood it was. The Breitbart audience knew about it. For 2 years, we had talked about it. For 2 years, we had articles about it. We had Breitbart London up for 3 years. The people that coached up the rednecks, rubes, and hobbits that come to this radio show and read that news site knew more about it than the elites. And here's why Brexit and 2016 are connected. It's China. It's the exporting of their deflation and exporting their overcapacity that has gutted the Midland heartlands of industrial England and gutted the upper Midwest in the apparel business down in the South. It gutted it. Those jobs, hey, folks, guess what? Those jobs went to China. Your livelihoods went to China. Your family's fortune went to China. And people made money off it. The elites made money off it. They made a lot of money off it. And that all started with the Clintons in the late 90s. It was bad, but it was the Bushes who should have known better. And they just looked the other way and helped drive it. And yes, if President Bush wants to come on and debate me or Karl Rove or something like that about their presidency, let me repeat this. It's the single most destructive presidency in the history of our country, and I include James Buchanan in that. Okay? It's not even a question. And I didn't even throw 9/11 in there. I let him off the hook. By the way, I'm a naval officer, and when you relieve the watch, you relieve the watch. You're on deck. It's your responsibility. I thought about this the other day. If President Trump, if this had happened in September, before I left the White House, that would be our responsibility. It's not the guy's responsibility who came before. Yeah, Bill Clinton did nothing. He exacerbated it. They were terrible. 9/11. If you're on watch, it's your responsibility. And in my analysis of the most destructive presidency in the history of this country, I do not even include that. God, you triggered me, brother.
Wow, drop the mic.
Hey, 6:25 in the morning.
Great coda, too, about 9/11, which, of course, I hold Clinton much more responsible. But I was shocked when Jeb Bush said that George W. Bush kept us safe in the debates. I remember my jaw hit the floor when he said that. It was like pretending 9/11 didn't exist.